welcome to Boca's Briefcase, sponsored by the Boca Raton Tribune and other sponsors that you saw. Thank you for giving us this platform to share hot topics that are going on in our local community. Before we get started with a pretty exciting show today with some really good speakers, I just wanted to let everyone know I found out last night myself, Governor DeSantis issued executive order 20-159, which extended the moratorium with evictions and foreclosures on executive orders 20-94. And that should expire August 1st, 2020 at 12:01 a.m. unless he issues more orders. For residential evictions that deal with non-payment of rent, that's going to put them again on hold throughout Florida. If you want more information on the other ways that order affects everything, you can check out the governor's website. It's also all over the news. Just type in 20-159. So before we discuss anything further, we need to get the speakers on screen. We have very exciting. These two gentlemen are just the best, some of the best speakers I've ever seen. We have the founding attorney of Rudman Law, Douglas Rudman. He's a former prosecutor with the Office of State Attorney for the 15th Judicial Circuit. He's spoken to schools, online, on TV, everything else. He talks with children and adults about the criminal justice system. He tries to teach people what the penalties are for different crimes, domestic violence, and such that are associated with drugs and alcohol. He's also an amazing criminal defense attorney. Doug Rudman, I'm so glad you're here to answer questions today about what's going on in America.
Hilary, thank you so much for having me. I can't tell you how appreciative I am to be able to speak on your show today.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited you're here. And then we also have, who is joined with Rudman Law, we have Stuart Sussman. So if you were ever to call Rudman Law, you would speak with Stu first, and he has an amazing background also. He was actually 2014 Palm Beach County Law Enforcement Deputy of the Year. He's had 15 years in law enforcement. Before that, he was a DUI task investigator. Both of these gentlemen have been out on the field 100%. They know what's going on and they can give great advice. So I highly recommend, if anyone has any questions, ask today. And of course, you can reach out to them after because they're here to give value to the community. But I just want to jump right in because there's so many topics and we're not going to be able to cover everything. There's just so much going on in our country. So, I mean, let's just get right into it. We were talking a little before when COVID first happened, and like in March, and everything went into shutdown mode. When everyone was staying home, everything was closed. I think Stu and I were talking. Crime. I asked you, did crime actually go down? General, street crime, such like that. I mean, do you want to respond to that? What was going on, Doug or Stu?
So let me jump in here real quick. You're asking two very, very, very good questions. Certain crimes, yes, they dropped off. The crimes that we have as far as property crimes and people going out. But we also saw an increase, believe it or not, in domestic violence and the injunction cases that would step up. All of a sudden, you have people who didn't realize just how incompatible they were in their relationships, being forced to spend time with each other in quarantine. And we've seen a huge uptick. And I think family law attorneys are going to see a big boom in divorces that are going to come through after this because of these people that realize just how incompatible they are.
That's awful. And that's, I'm glad you shared that because that's very good for the community to know. We're coming to 4th of July weekend. We have, different orders being issued, different ordinances being issued every day. I want to know what carries over into the criminal law world. For example, let's talk about masks. Masks, everybody wants to talk about masks or not masks. Is this something that you can be arrested for? Is this a criminal penalty? Can you address that?
So, Hilary, you bring up such an amazing topic because let me tell you something. It's so fitting that we're going into the 4th of July weekend, because I'm not trying to wave the flag in anyone's face, but we know that the 4th of July represents America's independence. And what we've seen because of this COVID-19 pandemic is just how quickly we were as a society to completely hand over power to the executive branch. And let me just explain this a little bit. You know, Congress, they're not able to get together because we actually held off on groups or meetings of more than 10 people. Even the judicial branch, the justices, they've said, listen, we're not going to honor speedy trial. We're delaying appeals, and everything was just
Wait,
done
hold
with
on that.
Go ahead.
I want you to continue that for a second, because that's a huge issue. Speedy trials are on hold. Your right to a speedy trial?
Your right to a speedy trial is on hold. Believe it or not, the state is given more time to be able to charge offenses. You have people that are sitting in custody with no right to speedy trial, and we just got word today that Palm Beach County is actually delaying and putting off jury trials until, or for an indefinite period. So now we have people sitting in custody. We have people sitting in custody without the opportunity to make bail, no speedy trial rights, and a delay indefinitely of jury trials. This is a very, very, very frightening time for us as a republic, because all branches of the government are not functioning equally. And that, as a defense attorney, criminal defense attorney, is very, very scary for me.
Right. So, and I didn't mean to interrupt you. And Stu, we're going to get to you in a second too, but we're going here. So let's lead that right into masks. So is it, and I think if, Stu, you might have feedback, or it might even be mine. When we're not talking, we can try to mute, because this always happens when we try to do it. But is mask a criminal offense, not wearing a mask?
So you raise another interesting issue. Masks, it's not necessarily what I would say a criminal offense. Here's what it is. You have the county commission that has come down unilaterally and voted 7-0 that you have to wear a mask wherever you are, okay? Now, the law allows the county commission to sit there and pass ordinances and create criminal penalties for violation of those ordinances. What they have said is you have to wear a mask when you're in public. If you don't wear a mask, the law actually says that the police have to give you an opportunity to correct the problem by putting a mask on. If you still refuse, the first penalty is $250. And then any subsequent violation that you are found to have committed goes up in a sum of $500, $750, so on and so forth. So the law does allow the county commission to pass certain ordinances that do create criminal penalties. We most recently saw this when they took marijuana and created the opportunity to charge marijuana by a county ordinance citation. We don't see a charge very often, but this is the best example of what we've seen in the recent past.
Thank you. I mean, you're explaining this so well, and I just love this conversation. I'm going to ask, because Stu, you're on the front lines at Rudman Law. What are a lot of people calling about, without giving away, confidential information? What are you seeing are people's concerns when they call the law office?
Well, I mean, to further expand upon what Doug just said, as far as the legality issues, the application, it's like the videos that you see on YouTube for people getting kicked off of flights. The law aspect of it is you're on private property. If you paid for a flight, or if you go into a store that's open to the public, it still is privately owned. So they have the right to refuse service. And if the mask is one of their requirements, I mean, the biggest thing that we've been getting recently is just, to be honest with you, it's the human nature element that people are just so on edge with everything. So we're getting an uptick in crimes involving just battery cases, intoxication aspects of people just being overly aggressive when they wouldn't normally be so. So if people are drinking at home, causing fights with their neighbors, we've been getting a lot of disputes when it comes to just things that would normally be brushed over and just, healthy resolved within the community. is now boiling over into a point where, as you see on the national news level, I mean, people coming out of their house with guns that have no business doing so.
Right. Well, there's a photo going around the internet now with a couple that are holding up guns at a protest. I think everybody's seen that picture. It's quite shocking, but there's a lot of unusual behavior right now. So I want to.
Well, Hilary, if I could chime in on one issue, and here's
Please.
What's so interesting. If you ask a lot of people about what makes our society so great, the whole concept, everyone likes to throw up freedom. We're going into the 4th of July weekend, and the concept is freedom and freedom and freedom. But as a criminal defense attorney, I notice how that freedom is pretty curtailed, because we have volumes of books that tell us about what we can't do. Every time there's a law that's passed that says what we can't do. So they say, well, how do we pass another law that says what we can't do? And here's where it gets interesting. I believe that the law that we have in this country and the laws that we have are designed so one person's individual freedom does not interfere with another person's individual freedom. Okay? Prime example, why is it a crime to hit someone else? It's called battery. Well, that is where my freedom to throw a punch intersects with someone else's freedom to not get punched.
Right.
And that's why we see these laws as they're being handed down. Why is there a mask edict? Well, I have an independent right to not wear a mask, but someone else might have an independent right to not confront someone who is not wearing a mask. So we always have this dichotomy. Where is the line that we have to draw between my individual freedoms and someone else's individual freedoms?
No, that's it. That's a good point, because we live in a society where, we're given this freedom, but we have to make sure it's beneficial so that we can all live together. And if freedoms, I guess the counter, if they go too far, what will happen to the free society itself? So do we police ourselves? Do we have the government policing? And then that's these arguments. And then we have.
And you brought up perfectly. I know Stu has traveled all over the state of Florida and actually lectured on self-defense issues. And you brought up that picture of the individuals that were outside their house. Now, keep in mind, that's a different jurisdiction. That's where it is. But in Florida, we have something called castle doctrine, where if someone wants to come inside your house, you have greater rights to be able to defend yourself, and you have greater immunities that are actually being given to you. And I can tell you that, Stu, both from his law enforcement background and from the tactical background that he's learned, actually is as close to an expert of this stuff as you can possibly get.
That's it. So, Stu, you being out there on the field, you've got all these years in law enforcement. What are some tips you can give to the community? Safety. I don't want to put words in your mouth, because I want you to speak on what you're comfortable speaking on. What's some value you can offer to give some people some advice who are out there? Maybe if they're interacting with a police officer, or just their common rights as an everyday citizen.
So the simplest aspect of it is you're not going to hold court on the street. So compliance will always be the best route. If an officer tells you to do something simple, everybody that wants to believe what they read on Facebook or the internet or Googling stuff that, they know their rights, it's so much easier in every which way just to comply and let the system work to the benefit of the individual. The biggest and most important thing, and especially being partially in the firearms industry, to know your rights, to know that what you can and cannot do. I think the scariest thing that we see in criminal defense work and even in law enforcement, you see people going out with guns in situations that don't apply to that. The easiest example to give to you is you are woken up in the middle of the night because your car alarm is going off or your security motion sensor picks up on something, and you go out of your house with a gun to confront somebody that was taking the spare change out of your car. You don't have the ability to use lethal force in an encounter for just, especially spare change in your car or your iPhone charger. You have to know your rights. You have to know what you're using that firearm for, and being able to accurately depend on what you were in fear for.
Firearms is an issue that's just, exactly. If you're going to have a firearm, you need to know what the legalities are and what your rights are related to that firearm. Otherwise, you probably shouldn't have a firearm.
Sadly, people don't. I think gun sales, the last time I checked, was up 300%. That's the average person that normally wouldn't have a firearm is now outside buying guns and not having any training, any responsible, courses taken other than their 4-hour block to get a concealed weapons license. And even then, it's just the basics.
And I want to address.
I'm sorry.
No,
Stu, I think you're right on with that. Because look, Voltaire said hundreds of years ago, with great power comes great responsibility. The Second Amendment guarantees you the right to bear arms. But I got to tell you, if you're going to have that right, you also have to take on the responsibility that goes along with that right. You have to know what the laws are. You have to know what is appropriate and inappropriate. And I think, like I said, with great power comes great responsibility. The responsibility is on the individual gun owner to know and understand what the laws are. And I can tell you that Stu is always available if you want to call our office to ask those questions, and we're going to absolutely be able to answer them. Or if we can't answer them, point you in a position or in a direction that it can be answered.
Definitely. And we should definitely, we'll share your number too on this webinar. And I think, Stu, you and I were talking about a couple of weeks ago, and I just want to bring it up just because people will be watching this. The group Moms Demand Action, they're very concerned because you're talking about the increase in gun purchases. You have all the children home, and if people are buying it, they don't know their laws. They don't know these things need to be in lock boxes. It could cause a lot more harm than good because, God forbid, you have a child that you can't put it on a child to say, don't touch it. It's not their responsibility. You need to make sure they can't get that. So we're hopefully going to have Moms Demand Action on here in a couple of weeks. But you brought up a really good point that I definitely recommend calling you guys. So let me bring up a subject that a couple people were texting me about to ask you, and I don't want to forget. What if you're driving through Boca Raton, and we could do Broward as a different example also, or even Dade, and you're pulled over by a police officer? Just the initial rights. What rights do you have? Can an officer, and this is an age-old law question too, but can an officer just ask you right away to step out of the car and search your car?
Stu, I'm going to let you go ahead. You do the traffic stop, and I'll talk about it afterwards.
I mean, people talk about this like nonstop. So,
how many traffic stops have you done throughout your career, Stu?
Thousands.
Okay, so forget the legal. Everyone always asks, how do you get out of a ticket? We are now at the position where we can talk to a formal police officer, and you've been on the other side of deciding to write or not to write. Tell us what a citizen can do, what their rights are, but also what they can do to actually diffuse the situation.
And again, for the viewers, this is not legal advice because every situation is unique. You need to speak to an attorney for your own situation, but these are general advice so you can talk to your attorney about these things. Stu, take it away, please.
So the simplest aspect of it from start to finish, if a police officer is going to effect a traffic stop on you, the biggest argument that we get from clients and from friends and citizens that ask me questions about this is that the cop pulled me over for speeding, but he followed me for 5 miles, or he pulled me over here, but he says I was speeding back there. That's totally within their right. When a police officer is going to effect a traffic stop on you, before he even activates his lights, he's going to run a records check on your vehicle license plate. That's going to tell him if there's any wanted persons, if the vehicle is stolen, so on and so forth. It's going to give him some basic officer safety information. When the officer effects a traffic stop, he turns on his lights. Florida law states you pull over where it's safe to do so to the right. Obviously, traffic and situations will dictate otherwise, but generally you want to pull over off the roadway. If you're going to go a little further into like a shopping plaza, they're human beings. Signal to them, point out the window with your hands that you're pulling over that direction. They may get a little heightened because you're not pulling over right away, but at the end of the day, it's as simple as just like any of us that are driving in the road and you want to let somebody in, the proper wave and hand signal changes the world. You can have somebody cut you off, but you say you're sorry just by waving your hand, and it changes that. The police officer doesn't know who's in that car. It's not anything personal when he's pulling you over. There's a violation, and obviously every officer takes certain violations a little bit more, harsh than others. But at the end of the day, they don't know who's going to be in that car. If it's a a woman going to church or a soccer mom with 3
Can they
kids.
ask you to get out of the car? Can they ask
Well, I'll get
you?
to that in just a second. So when an officer makes initial contact, he's going to come up to the vehicle. He's going to ask for your driver's license, registration, insurance. If there's a reason why that officer feels that there is a safety issue where he can't see in the vehicle, or you're acting suspicious in a certain manner, then he does have the authority to ask you to step out of that vehicle. The law does state that he has the ability, if he can articulate that for his officer's safety, he needed to do so. And those are challenges that Doug will bring up later on in court.
And then
But
can you look in your car after that?
So plain view, as far as searching inside your vehicle, if a regular person can look into the windows, then the officer can look through the windows. If you open your door to get out and he can see something in plain view, then yes, he'll be able to use that. Obviously, the situation is always the fact that when an officer effects a traffic stop, he's basically seizing you and your vehicle. You're being detained. You're not free to go at that point. The officer is conducting a lawful investigation based on his probable cause or reasonable suspicion that a crime occurred or an infraction occurred, that he's going to identify you. The biggest complaint that always people bring is in a traffic stop that I want to know why you stopped me. Well, that's the officer is affecting his job. He has the ability to pull you over, and then he has the responsibility, and the law backs him, to identify you. So after you give him your driver's license, your registration, proof of insurance, at that point, if you have any questions, then by all means, ask away if you'd like. Most officers will be human and friendly and polite enough to give that responsibility, but the respect is always shared. The biggest and most important thing that I tell people is that you want to get out of a ticket, be a human being, be polite, be respectful. I mean, I tell people, you make a cop laugh and you're going to get out of the ticket. And as Doug can attest, we don't really want, people calling us with tickets. We would rather, a situation that couldn't be avoided, a traffic stop, a ticket. It's a nothing thing. It's a smaller issue.
Now, Stu, let me ask you this question. We always hear when people call up that the officer was rude, the officer was mean when he first walked up to the car. First off, what is the most dangerous thing that a police officer can do in his daily activities?
Go to an unknown situation. Like I was just explaining.
Yeah, a traffic stop is one of the most dangerous things that an officer can do. And even before you make contact with the driver, I've seen on Live PD, I've seen on Cops, I've seen all these shows. Why do you see cops touching the back tail light of a car before they make contact with the driver?
So in most agencies, the training aspect of it is to touch the rear quarter panel, or more so the trunk, to make sure that the trunk is secure and closed, that somebody's not going to pop up out of it.
Are you kidding me?
No.
Yes.
The other aspect of touching the vehicle is if, God forbid, the vehicle sped off, you have identifying features that you've now left your fingerprints or your DNA on the back quarter panel of that vehicle.
And also, if you walk up and they shoot you, they're able to identify what that is. I mean, you're trained to identify threats from the beginning. One of the things, Hilary, that cops are taught at the academy is command presence. Just like, a girl at a bar knows immediately whether or not she's going to go home with you at the end of the night. A police officer only has a small amount of time to be able to exert that command presence, so the person in the car decides whether or not they're going to fight, run, shoot, or flee. So police are taught from the very beginning to create this command presence, and then after they've identified what the situation is and it's been de-escalated, then they can do their job. Am I correct with that, Stu?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's always about just making it as peaceful and as compliant as you possibly can. It'll be just a better scenario all around. And, Doug, you as well as I know that the biggest issue that we have with being able to help clients is not having the crazed maniac, lunatic yelling and screaming on a police body camera. Understand this, anybody that's getting pulled over, there's not an agency in South Florida that doesn't have an in-car camera system in their vehicle or a body-worn camera on their person. And you start acting all lunatic, crazy, yelling at the cop that he's wrong and you're right, it just makes you look even worse
Are
on
there
camera.
body cams in Palm Beach County and Broward and Dade? Is that in effect?
Almost every agency has a body worn camera, with the exception of the sheriff's office, and I'm sure at some point it's coming. If a law doesn't even get enacted to make it mandatory, but every PBSO vehicle has an in-car camera system, and every deputy's gonna have a mic pack on him. So just always assume that it's being recorded, and if you don't want it to come up later on and be watched by a judge, then just act responsibly, act polite.
And if these are turning then into cases, and you take these cases, Doug, are you going to court? Are you appearing via Zoom? Are you actually going into the courthouse now? When it gets to you?
Here's the funny thing. When it comes to civil cases, I know you mentioned at the top of the show that evictions have been held off for a period of time. But when we're dealing with people's rights and people's civil liberties, believe it or not, I'm still going into court on a regular basis. I'm going into court because, listen, there are some things that are just so important. In American justice, we deal with two concepts: money or liberty. And money is a lot of what's been kind of held off right now. That's called civil law. Criminal liberty, that's still at stake. And I'm very proud of the judges and the deputies and the prosecutors and the defense attorneys that are still going in and risking getting the coronavirus. Because, listen, other people's rights and other people's liberties, there's nothing more important. And like I said, and I'm not waving the flag again, going into the 4th of July weekend, I can't imagine anything more patriotic than the concept of going in to make sure that people are not being held without representation, that people are getting their fair share in court, and that accusations are not being answered without us going in and fighting for people's rights. And it's very important.
And by the way, anyone that wants to hire Doug and they want them on his side, he really enjoys good steak. You can send a gift card.
That's absolutely
on Doug's good side, because he posts that on his social media. You want these guys on your side. We're gonna have to wrap up the show soon too, but I want to definitely get out there. Maybe you can address some of common scams about going in the area, or if there's any safety tips for people that are home. I know we talked about one. You can mention about the moving trucks, how people, there's that scam. If you want to, either of you guys want to address those.
Stu, jump in on this one. You got this.
Oh, absolutely. Crime prevention is huge. So, it's changed a little bit in the dramatics with people working from home now, but the nighttime thing, for anybody watching this video, just do a quick Google search or go on YouTube and type in creeping. So it's a common thing. Kids between the ages of 13 and 17, especially now with Corona and everybody being locked up, they start walking through the neighborhoods. They become a little bit more adventurous. Everybody's either tried or attempted or thought about, like a simple thing like stealing a pack of gum. So what these kids do is they go out in their neighborhoods. And if you think you live in a gated community, you're even safer. You're not. It's because the kids in the neighborhood, either one friend will have 3 other friends stay over, and they'll start walking through the neighborhood and they'll just simply try car door handles. It's called creeping, and they'll do it every night without you even knowing.
They'll just try to do what?
They'll just walk up and try your car door handles. And if the door's unlocked, it's an open treasure chest for them. And that's how guns end up on the street. That's how your work laptop gets stolen. That's how you just realize your personal information is just taken because it's right off the stuff that's inside your glove compartment. And commonly, every day of the week, law enforcement gets a call for a vehicle burglary. And it's unfortunate because it wasn't a break-in. It was just, you forgot to lock your doors at night.
Can you share with people the moving truck scam as well?
Well, the moving truck scam is we see this on a regular basis, where you'll have people who work for unscrupulous moving companies, and they'll pick up your belongings and you'll have a signed estimate. And the estimate is how much it's going to cost to move your stuff. And then when they get to the end destination, they demand more money, or else they're not going to unload the items from the truck. And that is a scam that happens on a regular basis. Do not ask for an estimate. Make sure you tell them exactly what it is. They tell you what it is, and make sure you look at Google and Yelp reviews to make sure other people, have had positive experiences with this company. That being said, Hilary, I also want to jump in on one thing, and Stu will back you up. We see this all the time. Number one, the IRS is never going to call you directly and tell you, hey, there's a warrant for your arrest, you have an outstanding balance. And number two, there is no fraction of the government that ever accepts Apple Pay gift cards only. Okay, it's amazing how often we hear this. You're going to get a phone call, especially with the elderly, and you have people talking about, hey, we've got your granddaughter so-and-so in custody down here in Mexico. Get Apple cards and pay us this money or else she's not going to get out. Listen, again, if it sounds too much to be true, real government agencies will give you a number to call them back. Let me follow up with you. Let me call you back. Let me find out what's going on. Stu, I know we get these on a regular basis. We try to help people before anything else. And Stu, how many times do we get calls about scams and we say, listen, don't hire us. It's a complete scam. It's a complete farce. It's a complete fraud. Call an attorney. If it sounds a little weird, think before you act.
Well, and I want to go around too, because if like every week we try to leave something, you know, that's a value for this week, which you've already done this whole half hour. But in closing, what for people that are watching and that are going to rewatch the video throughout the week, you could tell them something. What do you want to share with them going forward, either for now or you know, during this time period from your experience?
Stu's going to go after me, but my thing is the best way to protect yourself from any of the criminal element is if it sounds too good to be true. 99 times out of 100, even 100 out of 100, it's absolutely true. It's too good to be true. These once in a lifetime opportunities just don't exist. They don't happen. Protect yourself. Be careful. The criminal element is always out there. If you find yourself and you are someone who is charged with a criminal complaint, pick up the phone and protect yourself with an attorney as soon as possible. There's a good reason why our soldiers are overseas fighting for these rights. They're fighting for these rights because these are the rights that you have when the government makes an allegation against you. If you find the police talking to you, pick up the phone and talk to us. That's the most important thing you could do. Stu?
Stu, and doing this too, we also got a question from Randy regarding your earlier discussion. If you are pulled over, can you prohibit a search? I don't know if you want to address that or not, but you can go ahead.
I mean, it would depend on what the officer has as far as probable cause. If he's going to smell narcotics such as marijuana, things like that, then you're not going to be able to prohibit it. The biggest and most important thing is to comply as best as you can. I mean, I'll defer to Doug as far as the legality aspect of whether you can or cannot deny that aspect of it. It just, in our line of work and defense work, it's just the ability that we have, especially nowadays with cameras and audio recordings on every traffic stop or every police interaction. It's just a matter of, if you're civil, if you're responsible, we can work the law in our favor in every which way. Aside from that, the biggest and most important thing, as Doug was talking about earlier, with scams and if it's too good to be true, I'm going to just reiterate the fact that if you get pulled over, if you get involved in a contact with law enforcement, if it's something as simple as we just had recently where it was a simple misunderstanding, but everybody being so heightened with Corona, it turned into a whole cluster that didn't need to. If you're involved in something, if law enforcement, gives you contact, or if you have a question about something. I mean, I spent 20 minutes with a gentleman on Monday that had a written warning thinking that he got pulled over and a whole bunch of tickets, and all it was a warning, and you didn't even know it.
Right.
Reach out. That is what we're here for.
I think you guys are so great. And anyone watching, if you have your own criminal attorney, you should have their number in your cell phone, a criminal attorney. So if, God forbid, you get involved in something, you can call them right away. And I know the Rudman group, they have their own app.
Yeah.
If you put it on there, there's actually a button, right? You can push on it. So if you don't have a criminal attorney, you might want to reach out to them, and you can download their app too, to make it really easy. If you feel your rights are being infringed and you don't know what to do, that's an emergency situation. So, and obviously we have a former a police officer, and we've got Doug Rudman here, former prosecutor.
Former prosecutor, exactly.
They really know what's going on.
Absolutely. Download our app, Rudman Law 24/7. It's available for both Android and iPhone. And listen, we're going to be here. The phones ring through 24 hours a day. We're here when you need us. We're dedicated to what we do. We're good at what we do because we care about our clients.
Okay. And again, if you guys didn't have a chance, I didn't get to read everything. If anyone watching during the week has a question, reach out to them. They're here. That's why they're here today, to answer your questions. They really want to help the community. These are both really great guys and strong advocates for their clients. So thank you so much for being here. In the next couple of weeks, we have some doctors and some medical professionals coming on. We're going to talk about hopefully we're going to get a children's pediatric doctor here talking about going back to school and other issues. So we've got some really great topics coming up. I really, again, want to thank Doug Rudman and Stu Sussman for being here. And we will see you guys. We went over today, but this was just, there's so many important things that the public should know. We'll see everyone next week, Wednesday, 2 o'clock, Boca's Briefcase. And thank you all for joining. Have a great week. Happy 4th of July. Have a safe 4th of July. Be safe. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.